we are on baby number 3. I hope you have been enjoying this birth series as much as I have. For me, I love reminiscing about labor and delivery. I actually really love labor. It's fun to me. It's fascinating. I know, call me crazy, but it's an enjoyable thing for me to do. So I love being able to just share my stories and how everything happens. But I do want to make it clear that these are only my experiences and the things that I felt was best. Basically, what I'm trying to say is this is not in any way like advice, medical advice, or help. I'm not a birth coach. I'm not a midwife. I'm not a doctor. This is just my own experiences based off of the things that I chose. That being said, let's just jump right into baby number 3. Man, this one is like jam-packed. Like I said, with babies 1 and 2, smooth, perfect, easy pregnancies, labors, deliveries. Everything was absolutely perfect. So when I found out that I was pregnant with baby number 3, it's kind of, in my mind, that's how I had planned for this pregnancy to go. But around 5 weeks, I actually started bleeding a lot, like a lot, to the point to where I wondered if I was even still pregnant. I went and got an ultrasound at like 6 weeks after the bleeding had kind of calmed down, and we did see the baby. We saw the heartbeat, but that was the first time that I was told that I had a subchorionic hemorrhage. When I first got this news, very first time, like I said, I had easy peasy, so perfect pregnancies before with the babies 1 and 2. So obviously when I first found out with the subchorionic hemorrhage, I freaked out. I panicked. I thought that the baby wouldn't make it. I thought that it was like a big deal. And for some people it is. That's why I say this is not medical advice. I'm just saying how I felt. I thought it was a big deal. And so I put myself on bed rest. At the time I didn't have any doctors yet. I was still seeing my midwife. She had me on bed rest. Obviously with 2 other kids at home, it was difficult. I realized really quickly that I needed a little bit of extra help, and so I went and found an OB at a hospital that I had been referred to by some friends. So going to the hospital, this was the first experience that I had ever had being pregnant, going to the hospital, going for checkups and things like that. And like I said, there's not a whole lot you can do when you have a hemorrhage. You just kind of have to wait it out, and then it will heal by itself most of the time. By the time I went there, the hemorrhage was still pretty big, and I was still bleeding kind of a lot. Through the whole first trimester, I was just bleeding on and off. Everything else was looking good at the time, so like blood pressure, everything else was going well. I want to say around 16-ish weeks when I found out that I was having a boy. Found out that the hemorrhage was cleared up, everything was looking good through the rest of the pregnancy, but I remember at about 29 weeks, almost 30 maybe, I felt like my body was going into labor. Because I was so worried with the hemorrhage at the beginning, then I was like really monitoring everything really closely. So I remember that night, then I felt like consistent, steady contractions, and I wasn't a first-time mom, so I knew what a contraction felt like. They weren't really painful, but they were actual contractions and actually coming at a pretty steady time. Now, as I've experienced just a lot, I wouldn't go into the hospital. But again, this is the first time that I've ever had an experience at the hospital, first time that anything in the pregnancy has been abnormal to any extent. So I kind of, in a way, felt like a first-time mom. So I started having these contractions, and I decided I'm not going to risk it. So I went to the hospital. It ended up being that I was just dehydrated, and I was a little bit stressed out and a little overworked, but not like bad. Anyway, so I decreased work hours after that, more just out of precaution, just to make sure that everything was going to keep going well. Then at around 36 weeks, since if you have a baby at 36 weeks or any time afterwards, the chances of having NICU time or anything like that goes significantly lower. So I remember thinking at 36 weeks, I do not even care. I don't care if I accidentally go into labor. I don't care if the baby comes. Like, I would welcome the baby. I'm so tired of this pregnancy. I'm just done. So I kicked up the work hours back into high gear. I was not being careful, so to speak, where I was taking it easy. I just didn't hold myself back anymore. I was just ready to just be done. So I lived life like a normal person again, finally, which was awesome. But then I remember when I first found my doctor, she was talking to me and I told her that I still wanted to plan on a home birth if the pregnancy fixed itself, if it continued to go as well as it was. And at the time, at around 36, 37 weeks, she had basically cleared me for a home birth with my midwife that I was still in touch with. So at the time, I was still planning on a home birth. About 40-ish weeks, then I had a checkup. And because I was 40 weeks, then it was protocol basically to go in for an NST, which is the non-stress test. They just monitor the baby, see how the baby's doing, and he was doing pretty well considering he was 40 weeks and term. But like, my body was showing zero signs of going into labor, except for the fact that for the entire month, from 36 weeks to 40, I was dilated to a 3, I think, the whole time. Yeah. 3 for the whole month. No, 4, because before that I was a 3 when I had gone into preterm labor, right? It actually was doing something. So I dilated to a 3 then. At the last month of pregnancy, I ended up being dilated to a 4 and nothing was happening. And like I said, I wasn't being careful. I wasn't taking it easy at all. At 40 weeks, she does the check and I'm dilated to a good 4. I don't even know how much he faced, but the baby was at a station 0. And if you don't know what that is, if you can Google it, there's like a pelvis and stations, right? Anyway, basically, to be able to start labor, the baby has to be at a station 0. That means it's right there, like ready to happen. So I'm dilated at a 4. The baby's at a station 0 and nothing is happening. Literally nothing is happening. I have no contractions. I feel no pain at all whatsoever. And I'm feeling great. They check his vitals in the NST and he's doing perfect. So my doctor says, okay, so what do you want to do? Do you want to be induced? What do you want to do? Do you want to go home and try to have this baby? Like, what's the plan? So I told her, obviously I'm still aiming for a home birth, and if I'm already this progressed, I don't see how I could not just like have a baby today, right? So I tell her that, and then she goes, well, here, how about this? Because, 40 weeks, the baby was doing okay considering he was 40 weeks, but obviously it was time to get him out. So she was like, how about this? I'll schedule you for an induction date when you are 41 weeks. That way it'll give you plenty of time. You have a week, go home, try to have this baby. If not, I would highly recommend that you come in to get induced because it's time. Like, we're done. So I say, okay, that sounds good. That sounds perfect. I go home, and then for that entire week, like I said, I'm still working full time. And every single night that week, then, every single night, I went walking like crazy. Up hills, down hills. One time I took my mom with me, and we walked like 2 hours. I'm not even kidding. It was just because, like, what else am I supposed to do with my time? I'm overdue. I want this baby out. Like, I was going stir crazy. So when I took my mom out walking, then, what are those little things called that help you pass the street? I don't know what it is. Anyway, up hills and down hills all over the place. And each time that I took my older girls, they weren't so tiny. I forget. I'm thinking like them now. Anyway, and each time that I went walking, most of the times that I went walking, I took my girls with, and we would walk to parks, and while they played, I would walk circles around the park, and I just didn't stop moving. I think my legs were in fantastic shape by the time that we had that baby. Holy crap! For an entire week. Okay. But like I said, I'm at a 4. The baby's at a station 0. Holy crap, it hurt to walk because he's right there. I carried him solo through the whole pregnancy anyways. But to have him just be sitting right there, nothing was happening for an entire week. So then I was going to be induced on a Sunday. So I remember Saturday being like, okay, this is it. We're going to do this. I went out to lunch or dinner. No, Friday night I went out to dinner with some friends. And I remember feeling some like contractions, but they weren't really strong, but I was like, come on, like, we're so close. Nothing was happening. It just wasn't working. So then Saturday morning I get up and I just deep cleaned my house, and like, not the easiest way. I remember instead of mopping the floor, I got on the floor on my hands and knees with a scrubber and a wash rag and everything, and I just went across the entire floor, like begging, come on, I feel something. And all day long, I feel no pain at all. No contractions at all. Not even Braxton Hicks. Nothing was happening. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't know what to do at this point. So I'm like, okay, they'll call me in the morning. And they said, you know, plan on about 6:30 to get the phone call. And I'm like, okay, we'll see. We'll see what happens. Because like I said, I still was hoping for that home birth. So I was hoping that I would go into labor that night. Didn't happen. Like I said, nothing. Felt no pains at all whatsoever that entire day. So I get the call from the hospital and she's like, okay, you ready to come in for your induction? And I'm like, oh yes, I am there. And she was like, okay, sounds good, come in. So I'm like, all right, cool. So like I said, Sunday morning, 6:30 in the morning, they call. We get up. I had my hospital bags packed the night before because, again, I was hoping for that home birth. So I waited till the night before, packed my hospital bags, and then got the girls ready, dropped them off at a friend's house, and then we booked it up to the hospital. So by the time we got checked into the hospital, it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and the room that they brought us into didn't have a tub, and like I said in my previous home births, the tub is where I kind of centered myself and really was able to labor well. So I kind of needed that tub. I still wanted the home birth experience type of thing. So I asked him, hey, is there another room that you have open by chance that has a tub? And she was like, oh yeah, for sure, totally. So we packed back up, moved rooms, got into a room with a tub, and then got reset up. And then it was about 9:30, I think. And then my doctor came down and she was like, okay, are you ready to get this baby here? And I'm like, you have no idea. I'm so tired of this. I've been trying. So then she's like, okay, let's check you. So she checks, and then she was like, I have no idea how you are still pregnant. I was like, well, what do you mean? She's like, you're like at a 5, 100% effaced, and the baby's right there. Like, I can feel the baby, you know, he was so low, and nothing was happening. So then she was like, what if we just try to break your water and see if that just starts things? Like, maybe you don't even need the pit at all. So I'm like, cool, great, fantastic. As least amount of meds possible, right? So she goes in, breaks the water, and then she's like, okay, do you want to just sit here for a while and wait? And I'm like, I'm not waiting. I'm ready to be done. So she's like, okay, well, you can go get up, walk around the hospital a couple of times. And I'm like, cool. So I get up, and then Wade and I, that was fun. So, and you'd think I'd be tired of walking, but no, I was like, I'm so, let's just go. Let's just go fast. So I get up about 9:50, 10 o'clock in the morning. We start making our rounds around the hospital, and I'm, again, feeling nothing except for water gush out because, well, they just broke the water. We're making our rounds, walking around, and I'm feeling great still. And I'm like, okay, I got this. We walked maybe 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I feel a huge contraction, like huge. And the contraction was really, really painful. So I remember stopping and being like, whoa, okay, I think this is it. I feel like it was the same as it was with Jasmine's birth, where there was absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden, bam, huge, hard contraction that just kind of takes you by surprise. And I panicked and freaked out a little bit because I wasn't expecting the pain, so I wasn't ready to deal with it. I stop and I'm like, okay, wait, like this is a really, really hard one. So Wade and I are standing in the middle of the hallway at the hospital, and I'm going, ow, yep, okay, I think it's starting. So then he's like, okay, good, that's awesome, great news. And I'm like, okay, yeah, right, this is what I wanted. Trying to remind myself, this is good. I've been asking for contractions. This is it. So I'm like, okay. But I don't want to go back into the room and start getting set up if it's not actually starting. So I'm going to walk a couple of times, or attempt to make sure that the contractions are coming at a steady, consistent pace. And I remember walking a couple of times around the receptionist desk, and she's like, how's it going? Do you feel anything yet? And each time that we would pass her, and I'd be like, no, still feel great. And then that time I passed her, and she was like, did it start? And I was like, yeah, it started. So I remember getting into the room and telling Wade, just run the bath water in the tub, because these are getting really, really like unmanageable. And my mind wasn't in the same mental place as it was with Jasmine's birth, where I could just take the pain and just run with it. At the beginning, I panicked a lot. So I got into the tub, and I had a couple of contractions in there where I was just breathing through it. And each time, like, in my mind, in my mental state with Jaslyn, I was taking the pain and really focusing on it and just working with that pain. And it was like, oh yeah, bring it on harder. And then with this birth, I sat in the tub and each pain, I remember looking over and seeing the cord that I could pull to call the nurse that would get me the epidural that would make the pain stop. So then obviously my mind wasn't in the right state to be able to work with the pain. So like I said, each contraction, I'm sitting there going, I don't think I could do this. Look at the cord. It's so tempting. So I remember coming out of one of the contractions and looking at Wade and going, I'm not doing this. I am not doing this. This is so hard. It's difficult. It came on way too strong. My mind's not there. I can't get myself to focus. And he was like, that's okay. Just call him. If you want to go natural, I'll help you. If you want to get the epidural, go ahead and call like right now. So I'm like, okay, we'll see. And so I wait for another contraction. And in that contraction, I'm like, I don't care. Call it. So I remember pulling the cord and being like, I don't even care. So then the nurse comes in. She's like, you doing okay? And I'm like, get me the epidural. I don't care how this happens. I don't know what this epidural is. I've only heard of it. I don't know what it means to get one, so I didn't have a fear of the needle or anything. I was just like, make the pain stop. You can do that, do it. Okay, let's go. So I get out of the tub. They call the anesthesiologist. I forgot what they were called. They call the anesthesiologist, and then another nurse comes in. And when we first got there, she seemed like she was an older nurse, and she seemed like really cranky, like really ornery. And I was like, oh, bummer, you know? I was hoping to get somebody that was a little bit more, woo, hey, how's it going? But then she comes in, and like I said, I'm panicking because the pain hurts really bad. So I get out of the tub, and as I'm getting up onto the bed, then I'm like bawling, and I'm going, holy crap, this hurts really bad. So then she kind of snaps into gear, and she grabs my legs and then pushes against my knees during the contraction, and instantly I felt the pain like relief. And I remember looking at her and being like, okay, keep doing that. That feels so much better. And while she was doing that during the contraction, I remember thinking, maybe I can do this by myself. Maybe I don't need the epidural. And maybe I can just have her keep doing this and we'll be fine. We'll be able to get through it. And then right then the anesthesiologist walked in. I'm like, nah, it's okay. It's fine. He's already here. I'm not going to make it waste this time. So then he's like, okay, get ready for the epidural. This is going to be a big needle. You're going to feel all this stuff. And I was like, oh, really? Like, I didn't know. I didn't research an epidural. I just knew it took the pain away. So he gives me the paper and I sign it, write the consent form. I'm like, yes, I don't care. Just put it in. So I get in position. They have you curl over so that they can shoot you up in the back, right? So I'm sitting there. I'm curled over and he's like, okay, you're going to feel a burning sensation. So I'm like, okay, waiting. I feel the burning sensation. I'm like, okay, cool. This isn't so bad. And then he says, you're going to feel kind of like a tap on your spine. And I was like, okay, like ready for it. The weirdest feeling in the entire world. It literally feels like somebody goes to the back of your spine and you're like, ah! Like, that's weird. I wasn't expecting it, but you have to hold really still. So I'm like, holy crap, like, is that normal? So I'm sitting there and all of a sudden I feel cold, like water almost just flow through my back into my legs. And I'm like, what is happening? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, am I, like, this is okay, right? So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay. And then all of the sudden, the pain just goes away and I feel nothing anymore. And I'm looking at the screen and the contractions are going way up off the charts and I'm sitting there going, huh, okay, yeah, see, this was a good decision to make. And he's like, okay. So I lay down and I'm like, I tell the doctors, I don't really want that much epidural. I just want to take the edge off. And then he was like, okay, well, here's the button that you can use to control it. So if you feel like you need more, push the button. So I say, okay, a couple of minutes in, let's see, what time did I get the epidural? By the time I got the epidural, it was probably about 11:30 in the morning. A couple of minutes into the epidural, I can't feel anything. Anything. I had seen people that were like, oh yeah, you can still feel your legs, you can still feel everything, but it takes the edge off. I can't even move my legs. There's no feeling, no sensation at all. So I'm like, okay, like this is odd, but cool. Great, whatever. So I'm sitting through the contractions and my mom is there and she asked me, well, how are you feeling now? And I said, oh, I'm great now. And then instantly I just get this. And okay, so before they gave me the epidural, then they checked, because I was like, wait, before you do this, check me first to see how far I progressed. And they were like, okay, you're still at a 5. And that's kind of what pushed me over the edge and be like, I don't care, then just give me the epidural, because this, like, I can't keep doing this. And I don't want to. So that's kind of what made me say, yeah, let's do it. So right before they gave me the epidural, I was at a 5. They gave me the epidural. A couple minutes into it, I start feeling really nauseous, like I'm going to puke. And I remember hearing from one of my aunts who had gotten an epidural that she said, because the pain goes away during transition, a lot of moms get nauseous. And so because you can't feel the pain with an epidural, you get more nauseous. I don't even know why, but you just get more nauseous. So as soon as I start feeling sick and queasy, I'm going, holy crap, is this transition? And because of how quickly my birth went with Jaslyn, it wouldn't have been abnormal to me. And so the nurse was in there, and I was like, I feel really, really sick, hoping that would be like, maybe we should check her. And then she was like, okay, sometimes that's an effect of the epidural. And I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, no, I feel like really sick. So they get me like that barf bag thing. And then I feel my hips kind of open. Somehow, like I said, I can't feel anything, what's going on, but somehow I feel my hips open up. So I say to my mom, loud enough for the nurse to hear, hoping it's gonna click, right? So I'm like, Mom, I feel like my hips are opening up. And I look at the nurse and I'm like, is that normal? Are you supposed to feel your hips opening up? Again, how did she not think we should check her? Anyway, so I'm saying all this stuff, and then she's like, no, that's fine, you're fine, you're fine. She keeps brushing me off, and so finally I look at her and I'm like, I need you to check me. Go get somebody to check me. I think it's time. Like, I'm just telling her this. She's like, honey, you just got the epidural. You were just barely at a 5. And I'm like, go check me. I think that this is it. And so then she was like, okay, let me go get a nurse. So then she leaves the room, and I'm sitting there going, holy crap, like something's going on. And I tell my mom, and she's doing the same thing. She's like, it's okay. Don't freak out. And I'm like, no, seriously. So I look at Wade and I'm like, what do we do? So then I'm sitting there, and like I said, I'm feeling really, really nauseous. So then I have the bag here, and I can't move my legs. I can't move anything, and I'm on my side. And I'm sitting there thinking, holy crap, hurry up, nurses, come in here and check me. So as I'm sitting there, then I feel the baby kick at the top of my belly really hard, and then feel it go zoom and slide, and the movement of everything just pushed the nausea over the edge. So I go, and then puke. Pop! There's the baby. So then I'm like, holy crap. And I don't know what's happened because I still can't feel anything, but I feel empty up in my belly. I felt him kick himself out, basically, and then I helped him by going, what? So anyway, then the nurses and doctors come rushing in, and they're like, oh, he's off the monitor. I'm like, it's because he's out. So I pull the blankets over, and then they go, oh, the baby. So he's like halfway out. So they're like, okay, push a little bit. And I go, what? And then the effort and energy that it takes to go, what? Gets him the rest of the way out. And they're like, here, you had your baby. And I was like, oh my heck, what just happened? I knew I was close. When a not first mom, anytime mom even says, check me, you check, because they might be close. Anyway, so quite an experience at 11:50 in the morning, 2 hours after my water broke, or after they broke my water. Atticus Lloyd, my first boy, was born, and he was perfect. He was so perfect. Part of the reason that labor was so difficult kind of at the beginning was because he was posterior. So that, plus the fact that nobody was there to catch him or to help him come out, then I did have some minor tearing at the end, but it wasn't too bad. And then my doctor comes down and she's like, oh, you couldn't wait for me to have your baby? And I'm like, I told them to tell you that I was ready. And she just was laughing. She's like, well, you said you had fast labors and deliveries. I should have listened. And I'm like, you all should have. How does this happen? Anyway, so she comes down, she congratulates me, kind of fixes me all up and makes me better. And yeah, that was my hospital experience. I feel like it was not that long after I got the epidural that the baby was born. And so knowing that, I wish I would have just had that nurse just push on my knees to get me through a couple of contractions, because he was so close anyways. Like I said, he was right there. And he came right after I got the epidural, so I didn't even need it. And by the time that it actually fully kicked in, and he was already born, and then I had to wait a couple hours for it to wear off after that. First hospital experience wasn't bad. Quick, easy, fast labor and delivery, and baby was here.